Elite Facts presents
Spot the Difference number 10.
20.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to a new edition of Spot the Difference. In this video, we'll be looking at 30 new Spot the Difference puzzles. Feel free to pause at any time to take a closer look, and we'll show you two images side by side. They'll stay up temporarily, and then we'll move on to the answers. There are 5 differences in each puzzle. Good luck. Score yourself 1 point for each correct answer, and keep a tally in your head or on a piece of paper. Again, we've got 30 rounds in total, so let's get started. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you may notice right off the bat is that SpongeBob is missing a hole on the side of his head. Next, you can see that there is an additional bubble on the left side of the picture floating up. Next, you can see Squidward only has 2 legs, or tentacles, or whatever. Next, you can see that Patrick is looking up towards us rather than looking blankly into the distance. And finally, you can see that Squidward only has 2 forehead lines instead of 3. Did you catch them all?
19.
Next up, we have the always classic DC superhero, none other than the Caped Crusader Batman. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you may notice is that the hand jewelry, the severed hand, is missing the O detail in love. Next, you can see the shadows on his right shoulder, our left, have changed. Next, you can see that Batman is now missing his bottom lip. Poor Bruce never did get over Jason Todd, did he? Oh, wait, he replaced him pretty quick. Never mind. Next, you'll see that there is an additional detail on his wrist guards. And finally, you can see in the bottom right corner there is an extra symbol. Did you catch them all?
18.
Next up, we have a Samsung battery. Can you spot all the differences? First, you can see that the text underneath the Samsung logo is much smaller. Next, you can see the line going through the middle of the charger has a chunk taken out of it. Next, you can see the logo for the battery in the back has changed as the A is upside down. Next, you can see that it says China instead of Chine in the description. And finally, you can see that the description at the bottom of the battery says 3 VLI ion instead of 3.8 VLI ion. Did you catch them all?
17.
Next up, we have a game of darts. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you'll notice is that the number 1 has changed to 2. Next, you can see the number 4 has lost the bottom detail on it. Next, you can see that part of the board has changed from green to red. Next, you can see that one of the darts has extra stripes added to it. And finally, you can see that the note at the top of the board has a portion of the bottom cut off from it. Did you spot them all?
16.
Oh my God, this show was golden. I could honestly listen to Carl's outrageous rambling all day. Anyway, can you spot the differences? First thing you can see is that Ricky is no longer wearing a V-neck sweater. Next, you can see that Carl has had enough of Ricky and Steve's insults and is now mad. Next, you can see that there is a missing boom mic over Ricky. Next, you can see that Steve now has 3 buttons on his shirt instead of 2. And finally, you can see that Ricky is missing a few tufts of hair on the back of his head. Maybe he's starting to get a head like an orange. Actually, it'd be more like a squash given his head shape. Did you catch them all?
15.
Next up, we have a picture of Mario and Yoshi. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you can see is that Yoshi has grown an extra finger. Next, you can see that there is an extra block on the ground in the top right corner. Next, you can see that an extra spark has strayed away from the main explosion. Next, you can see there's an extra row of crops on the ground towards the left of the picture. And finally, you can see that the sunflower at the bottom of the picture is now missing. Did you spot them all?
14.
Next up, we have the Royal Air Force Red Arrows performing. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you'll notice right off the bat is that there's another plane in the picture. Next, you can see that the main plane has a different icon where the Royal Air Force icon should be. Next, you can see that the point at the front of the plane, our apologies, we don't know all the terminology, is much longer than the original picture. Next, you can see that the hatch towards the bottom of the picture is missing a bit of detail. And finally, on the ground, you can see that the barn is missing. Did you spot them all?
13.
Next up, we have a pop vinyl of the Suicide Squad incarnation of the Joker. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you might notice is that the number of this pop vinyl is now 97 instead of 104. Next, you can see his cheek tattoo has moved more towards the center of his face. Next, you can see the picture of him on the box is missing the damaged forehead tattoo. Next, you can see the box says it's only 14 plus instead of age 14 plus. And finally, you can see that his pants are missing a gold star up towards where his belt buckle is. So did you spot all the differences?
12.
Next up, we have a picture of the Blue Eyes White Dragon from Yu-Gi-Oh! Can you spot all the differences? First thing you'll notice is that the pedestal it's perched on is missing a light on it, or a gem, we can't tell. Next thing you can see is the additional stars in the bottom right corner. Next, you can see that its right leg is much lower than it is in the original picture. Next, you can see the horn on its wing is much smaller than the original. And finally, you can see that it's missing one of the horns on its face. Did you spot them all?
11.
Next up, we have the lovable alien himself, Roger, from American Dad. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you'll notice is that he doesn't have a cigarette anymore. Given his anger, he probably needs one. Next, you can see one of the stars on the circular border in the background is now missing. Next, you can see that he's looking down instead of straight ahead. Next, you can see that he has an extra line on the side of his head. And finally, you can see the knot of his tie has a different color pattern. Did you spot all the differences?
10.
Oh dear. Is this appropriate? Screw it. They're cookies. I'm sure it's fine. Anyway, can you spot all the differences? First thing you'll notice is that there's an extra window added on the building in the back with the light on. Next, you can see that there's one less window on the building to the far left of the picture. Next, you can see that the guy is wearing a shirt that says drug instead of drugs. Next, you can see the cookie hooker, sweet Jesus, we never thought we'd say that today, is wearing a one-piece suit now. And finally, you can see the cop car now has both red and blue lights on it instead of just a red light. Did you spot them all? Dear God, I feel disgusting after seeing this.
9.
Next up, we have Darth Vader and a stormtrooper face-to-face with a shark head. Okay, as strange as it is, we'd love to see Darth Vader fight a shark. That would be insane. Anyway, can you spot the differences? First thing you can see is that the wallpaper in the background has an extra pattern just above the red and orange streak on the wall. Next, you can see that the stormtrooper helmet is missing the ventilation on it. Good luck breathing in that. Next, you can see that the shark is missing a few teeth. Might have been a rough fight with Darth Vader. Next up, oh, very funny, adding a troll face in place of the shark photo. And finally, you can see the flyer at the bottom says special events instead of 2014 special events. Did you spot them all?
8.
I have no idea what the hell is happening here, but can you spot the differences? First thing you'll notice is that, Jesus, this is nightmarish, the guy in the picture is missing his nostrils. Next up, you can see that the safety badge on the door is now missing. Next, you can see that the girl on the ground doesn't have rope on her face now. Again, what the hell is happening in this picture? Next, you can see that she is also missing one of her fingers. And finally, you can see that the bottle of spray in the background is almost empty. You might want to go out and buy more of that stuff. Did you catch them all?
7,
Next up, we have an image of someone struggling to stand up on stilts. Can you spot all the differences here? First up, you can see that the person helping her stay steady has a different handkerchief on the back of his neck, as it's all white rather than being white and orange. Next, you can see that the guy in the background needs an exorcist, as he's now floating. Next up, you can see that the orange tip on the pole is now all gray. Next, you can see that there is missing equipment in the background. And finally, you can see that another flag has just appeared in the background. Did you spot them all?
6,
Next up, we have a bike race, Tour de France, I believe. Can you spot the differences? First thing you can see is that one of the cyclist's shadows has changed. Next, you can see that the logo on the same cyclist's shorts has changed. It says ample instead of lample. Next, you can see that the wristband one cyclist is wearing has changed from orange to pink. Next, you can see the chimney of the building in the background is now much taller. And finally, you can see that the kid being held up has disappeared. Hope he didn't get dropped. Did you spot all the differences?
5,
Next up, we have a crowd of people. Can you spot the differences? First thing you can see is that the sign is missing some detail on the crosswalk. Next, you can see that the man's polka dot hat is missing a dot on it. Next, you can see that one of the chimneys in the background is missing. Next up, you can see the guy in the bottom left corner is now looking like a boss because he's now wearing shades. And finally, you can see that the window in the background is smaller as it's missing a row of glass. Did you spot them all?
4,
Next up, we have a lizard, just a regular old lizard. Can you spot the differences? First thing you can see is that it's missing one of its claws. Next up, you can see that the object toward the right of the picture is now missing. Next, you can see that the lizard technically doesn't have an eyelid when looking at its right eye. Well, his left, technically, if you want to be that guy. Next, you can see that its bottom jaw is much smaller than the original picture. And finally, you can see that the shoulder has much larger and less scales on it. Did you catch them all that time?
3,
Next up, we have a classic Avengers comic book cover. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you'll probably notice straight away is that Captain America is missing the A symbol on his mask. Next, you can see that the has been removed from the Avengers. Next up, you can see that Thor's hammer is missing detail. Next, you can see that Iron Man is now missing his arc reactor. And finally, you can see the quote, "Captain America lives again" is now missing the exclamation mark. Did you spot them all?
2,
Next up, we have all the doctors through history lined up in an epic picture. Can you spot all the differences? First thing you can see is that Peter Capaldi has decided to possess the body of David Tennant. We're pretty sure Time Lords can't do that. Next, you can see that Christopher Eccleston's shirt has changed color from green to black. Next up, you can see that Matt Smith's bow tie has changed color. Next, you can see that Peter Davison and Colin Baker have swapped places. And finally, you can see the question mark on the sweater is now upside down. Did you spot them all?
1,
And finally, oh dear God, that looks absolutely amazing. Can you spot the differences on this pizza advertisement? First thing you will probably notice right off the bat is the Pizza Hut logo in the empty space of the picture. Next, you can see that the Pepsi logo is now different as it's missing the white detail on the icon. Next, you can see the person who's grabbing a slice of pizza is now missing a finger. Must have gotten too close to someone's hungry mouth. Next, you can see that the cap on one of the bottles of Pepsi has changed color. And finally, you can see that the back pizza is missing a pepperoni slice. Did you catch them all? Well, that concludes this episode of Spot the Difference. Once again, add up your scores and let us know how well you did in the comments below. Thanks for spotting by.
Don't forget to like us and subscribe for more elite facts.